The insult hit her like a slap, not because the words were shouted, but because of how casually they were tossed. "Another drink," the man in the midnight blue tuxedo commanded, thrusting his champagne flute toward her without looking up. He flicked his wrist with practiced ease, expecting service. To him, she was part of the decor, an unseen hand meant to keep his glass full. He didn't see Amara Lewis at all, and that was where the sting lay. In his eyes, she was a prop, not a guest, not a leader, not someone who controlled more capital than he could imagine. The Riverside Hotel's ballroom glittered with opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light on polished marble floors. The air smelled of expensive perfume and aged whiskey. White-gloved servers glided between clusters of investors and entrepreneurs. Music hummed softly beneath the constant murmur of voices discussing mergers, venture rounds, and the latest unicorn valuations. It was an exclusive environment where reputations were currency. Amara wore a crimson gown that hugged her athletic frame and a confident smile, yet she was mistaken for staff because of the color of her skin. Her presence went unnoticed until someone wanted something from her. She steadied herself, forcing her voice to remain gentle. "I'm a guest," she replied, showing her embossed invitation. The man's wife, draped in jewels, plucked the card from her hand and ripped it in half. "Not anymore," the woman sneered, tossing the pieces aside. The cruelty was deliberate and public. Conversations around them faltered, the insult floating over the jazz. Humiliation flickered, but Amara clung to the lessons instilled by her parents. Her father often said, "They'll try to shrink you to make themselves bigger. Keep standing tall." Her mother would add, "If they don't make space, build your own table." Those words had carried her through childhood classrooms where her name was mispronounced and boardrooms where she was mistaken for the assistant. Tonight they steadied her hand. The man with the midnight blue tuxedo, Gregory Houseman, raised his voice. "Security!" he barked, his cheeks flushed. "We have a gatecrasher." A guard began to weave toward them. Gregory's friends, all influential financiers, smirked. They were used to controlling the narrative. Amara didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her clutch, her fingers gliding over her phone. She typed a short code. Phase 2. It wasn't for reassurance. It was a command. Her firm, Lewis Capital, was the quiet backbone of a major acquisition the Houseman family had spent months negotiating. Her message would redirect funds in real time. In another part of the city, her chief of staff would receive the code, contact the necessary banks, and trigger clauses prepared for such contingencies. As the guard approached, a young server unexpectedly stepped forward. "Sir, I checked her in. She's on the VIP list," he stammered. He balanced a tray of canapes while trying not to spill anything. His voice quivered, but he looked straight at Gregory. By challenging the wealthy guest, he risked his job. Courage sometimes comes from the most humble corners. Amara felt gratitude wash over her. She made a mental note to remember his face. A reporter, her press badge visible, lifted her camera. "Can you explain why you tore up her invitation?" she asked the Housemans. The question was straightforward, but the presence of media turned a private humiliation into a public event. Now Gregory and his wife had to confront the story they were creating. Behind the reporter, another guest raised their phone, capturing video. Within minutes, perspectives of this moment would circulate beyond the gilded walls. The guard stopped, unsure. "Ma'am, may I see your ID?" he asked quietly. There was an apology in his eyes, a recognition that he was being used. Amara produced both her driver's license and a spare invitation. His eyebrows shot up when he saw her name accompanied by the words "keynote speaker." He turned back to Gregory. "She's not only a guest, sir. She's one of tonight's speakers." Suddenly, the accusation crumbled. The power dynamic shifted. An uncomfortable laugh escaped one of Gregory's friends. Gregory's face reddened. His wife's hand trembled. Around them, murmurs swelled. Investors checked their phones and exchanged glances. The ripple began. Amara's earlier message had reached her team. Someone whispered, "Did you see the alert?" Another muttered, "The financing just fell through." In mere minutes, the houseman's carefully orchestrated deal began to unravel. Amara didn't have to raise her voice or make a scene. The market spoke for her. The vibration of phones broke the music's rhythm as people looked down at screens, their carefree expressions morphing into concern. While the whispers grew, Amara's thoughts traveled back through her journey. She remembered studying at the library until it closed, then going home to a cramped apartment to help her younger brother with his homework. She thought about the closed doors in boardrooms and the cold calls that went unanswered. She recalled the first investor who took her seriously, a woman who ran a fund focused on minority-owned businesses. That meeting was in a modest cafe, not a skyscraper, and the investor had been more interested in Amara's passion than her polish. Signing that first deal felt like stepping out of the shadows. Every slight and every triumph had sharpened her resolve. They had taught her to be patient, strategic, and resilient. Each wound became a scar, and each scar a marker of growth. She glanced at the young server again. He had returned to his duties, but he kept glancing over, searching for assurance that he had done the right thing. She offered him a small nod. She would make sure his bravery was rewarded, not punished. She also looked at the reporter and saw determination in her eyes. There was solidarity in those shared glances. It wasn't just about a torn invitation. It was about the everyday indignities people of color endure and the incremental progress made when someone speaks up. Her phone buzzed once more. "Executed," the message read. The funds had been diverted. The acquisition the Housemans depended on was now out of reach. Amara didn't smile, but relief eased the tightness in her chest. She remembered the fear of her early days in business when a single lost contract would mean layoffs. Now she had the capacity to protect herself and others while making clear that discrimination carried financial consequences. It was the practical application of her mother's advice to build her own table and invite others to sit with her. Around her, the energy changed. Some guests shuffled toward her, offering awkward apologies or pretending not to have noticed. Others avoided eye contact, embarrassed by their silence. Gregory and his wife stepped back, their phones glued to their ears, whispering urgently. In contrast, strangers approached Amara with quiet words of support. "I'm sorry," one older woman said, squeezing her hand. "They had no right." A young entrepreneur murmured, "Thank you for standing up. We're watching." In minutes, allegiances were shifting. Amara thanked them all, her voice calm. She wasn't interested in gloating. This was not about revenge, but about dignity. It was about reminding those who held power that it comes with responsibility. She had changed the room by refusing to be erased and by using the tools she built over years of perseverance. She looked up at the chandeliers, allowing the soft light to wash over her. Despite the insult, she felt a deep sense of peace. She belonged here, not because the houseman said so, but because she had earned her place. The beauty of the moment was not just that she had defended herself, but that she had done so with grace and strategy. The band continued to play. Conversations resumed, but they were laced with caution. The story of what happened would travel far beyond those walls. It would be recounted in articles and online posts, in whispered warnings among investors, and in the quiet encouragement parents would give their children, "Look at her. She didn't let them define her." This single moment of prejudice was being transformed into a lesson on resilience and accountability. It became a narrative of a black woman who confronted injustice with poise and redirected the power dynamics of an entire room. As the first chapter of this night closed, Amara remained poised. She knew there would be another confrontation soon. She hadn't yet revealed the full extent of her influence or the depth of her plans. The Housemans hadn't fully grasped how fragile their empire was without the support of those they treated with contempt. The audience hadn't yet seen the fallout, but she was ready. She would handle the next steps with the same composure she had shown tonight. For now, she allowed herself to breathe, to feel grateful for the unexpected allies, and to trust that justice, in its own way, was unfolding. She kept her head high, knowing that she didn't need anyone's permission to be there. She had already built the room she stood in. The night air tasted like freedom as Amara stepped from the hotel into the city's embrace. Behind her, the gala's final notes dissolved into memory, but ahead lay a cascade of consequences and choices. She sank into the back seat of her car and called her chief of staff. "How bad is it?" she asked as the city lights streamed past. "They're scrambling," Nadine replied, voice crisp. "Houseman's lawyers fired off a warning about breach of contract. Our legal team says it's smoke with no fire. We're within our rights. Social media's blowing up. Clips of you and that woman already have millions of views, and support is pouring in from partners. Still, we should get ahead of this." "Draft a statement," Amara said. "Make it about values. Schedule a morning meeting, and find Marcus, the server who defended me." The call ended. Amara leaned back, remembering the weight of the torn invitation and thinking of her parents' tiny kitchen and their belief that wealth without integrity was worthless. By sunrise, Amara was in her office, a glass box overlooking the city. The early hours suited her. They felt like stolen time. Soon the building would throng with people, decisions, and whispers. Nadine appeared with coffee and a determined expression. "We're ready," she said. In the conference room, Amara faced her top team. Maria, the general counsel, wasted no time. "Our exposure is minimal," she reported, pointing to contract clauses on the screen. "We have morality terms and discretionary funding rights. Legally, Houseman doesn't have a leg to stand on." Aisha, head of communications, added, "The court of public opinion is our larger concern. Pulling funding over what some will call a slight could be framed as emotional rather than ethical. But if we frame it as aligning with our values and standing against discrimination, the narrative shifts." "So we do that," Amara said. "Our statement will acknowledge the incident, speak about zero tolerance, and focus on the broader mission. No names, no pettiness. Highlight that we take action when partners violate our principles." She looked around. "And I want to recognize the people who stood up when they didn't have to." Marcus arrived soon after, looking nervous but hopeful. He wore clean jeans and a collared shirt, clutching a notebook like a security blanket. "I'm studying accounting," he said, eyes wide. "My mom wanted me to be here on time." Amara smiled. "You risked your job to tell the truth," she told him. "We'd like to offer you an internship and cover your tuition. It's not charity. We believe in investing in people who invest in justice." His voice broke as he tried to thank her. It was a small act for her, but for him it could change his trajectory. For her, it grounded the lofty language in tangible actions. Throughout the morning, messages flooded her inbox. Anonymous texts told her she was a disgrace. Others called her a hero. Her social media filled with the faces of young women and men who saw themselves in her. A group of black entrepreneurs sent flowers with a note, "Your courage gives us courage." For every hateful remark, there was a voice of support. Still, the negativity gnawed, reminding her of nights when her family's mailbox was vandalized after they moved into a white neighborhood. She stiffened her resolve. She had resources now. She alerted security to increase monitoring. She would not be cowed into silence. Melanie from City Business Weekly arrived late morning, hair pulled back, eyes alert. "After the gala, I started digging," she said, opening her laptop. "I found lawsuits alleging Houseman's discriminatory lending. I spoke with sources who say minority founders are routinely charged higher interest. And there's a doctor who claims he sold his diagnostics company under pressure after Houseman threatened to block his patents. I'm still verifying, but if this holds, it shows a pattern." Amara absorbed the information. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "Prepare your story carefully. They will spin this to make it look like I orchestrated it." "I know," Melanie replied. "I won't frame it that way, but you need to know what's coming." After Melanie left, Amara met with the compliance team. "Beyond Houseman, we need to audit all our partners," she instructed. "We've said we value diversity. Now we must act. This isn't about punishing one family. It's about ensuring our capital doesn't prop up systemic exclusion." During a video call, Jameson Bright, CEO of rival firm Harlow Group, appeared on screen. His salt-and-pepper hair and sharp suit contrasted with his warm demeanor. "What you did last night sent shockwaves," he said. "Because of your redirection, we've already closed our acquisition. More importantly, we're receiving calls from entrepreneurs who thought no one would ever fund them. I want to propose a partnership. Together, we can launch an initiative supporting underrepresented founders. We can open supply lines previously dominated by Houseman. We can set a standard." Amara felt the significance. Aligning with Harlow could amplify impact, but also entangle them in a contentious battle. "I'm interested," she replied, "but we have to ensure governance and accountability. No token gestures." "Agreed," Jameson said. "Let's discuss details soon." Their call ended as Nadine rushed in with news. "Someone on the board leaked a memo," she said, eyes wide. "It claims you acted on personal emotions. It's making the rounds online. Investors are talking." Amara's stomach tightened. "Which board member?" "We don't know yet," Nadine said. "But the memo references sensitive details from our last session. It could be Martin, Claire, or Devon." Amara scheduled calls with each. Martin, a billionaire investor, chastised her gently. "I respect your principles, but you could have disciplined them privately," he said. "The optics of pulling funding so quickly make us look unstable." "It wasn't a private matter," she countered. "It was a public humiliation. Disciplining quietly condones the behavior. Our brand stands for inclusion. Investors who can't support that are welcome to leave." Martin grumbled, but nodded. Claire, the legacy finance officer, expressed feeling blindsided. "You could have consulted us," she said. "There wasn't time," Amara replied. "The harm was public. If I had hesitated, we would have signaled acceptance. We can discuss protocols, but sometimes leadership requires immediate action." Devon, the younger member, was candid. "I didn't leak anything," he stated. "Initially, I thought we acted rashly, but seeing the support and the backlash Houseman is facing, I realize you were right. I underestimated the power of our values." After the calls, Amara stared out her office window. The morning sun had turned into afternoon glare, bathing the city in a harsh brightness. Decisions that seemed clear at dawn were now being questioned by people she trusted. She allowed herself a moment of doubt, then brushed it away. Doubt was a luxury she couldn't afford. She pressed the intercom. "Nadine, schedule an emergency board meeting. We need to address the leak and reaffirm our values." By mid-afternoon, her parents called. Their voices, warm with pride and worry, were balm. "We saw the clip," her father said. "You were calm. I would have flipped the table." They laughed. "But you did the right thing," her mother added. "Remember when we organized the factory union? They said we were troublemakers, but we got better wages. Sometimes you have to make trouble for the comfortable." "I know," Amara said softly. "It's just heavy." "Don't carry it alone," her mother replied. "Lean on your community." After they hung up, Amara felt steadier. She returned to the flurry of emails with renewed purpose. She answered a message from a college student in Mississippi who wrote, "Seeing you on that stage made me believe I can be there too." She signed a pledge to fund a scholarship for Black students in finance. She reviewed the final version of their public statement, which read, "Lewis Capital stands against racism and discrimination in all forms. When partners violate our principles, we take decisive action. We thank the individuals who courageously spoke up. We reaffirm our commitment to supporting diverse founders and creating inclusive opportunities." She smiled, satisfied. It was clear, firm, and forward-looking. As dusk approached, she decided to head home. Her apartment was filled with art and plants, a sanctuary above the chaos below. She kicked off her shoes and turned on the news. Pundits were already debating whether her actions were justified. One called it performative righteousness. Another hailed it as long overdue accountability. She turned off the television and called her parents again just to hear their voices. After a simple dinner and an attempt at reading, her phone buzzed. The message came from a number she hadn't seen in years. Simone. Once a friend and colleague, Simone had betrayed her by leaking a business plan to a rival. Now, she was reaching out. "I heard what happened," the text read. "I'm sorry for how I treated you. I also have information you might need. Can we talk?" Amara's pulse quickened. Old wounds resurfaced, mingling with curiosity. Simone's betrayal had hurt deeply because it was personal. A black woman undermining another. Trust broken by someone who should have understood the struggle. What could Simone want now? Amara forwarded the message to Nadine, asking for her take. Nadine replied quickly, "This could be important, but be careful. Meet in public." Amara stared at the message, weighing caution against potential benefit. She typed back, "Let's meet tomorrow at noon. Coffee by the park." She hit send, watching the 3 dots appear and disappear as Simone began to respond. Outside, the city buzzed, oblivious to her internal storm. She exhaled, letting the night's darkness wrap around her like a promise. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more decisions, and maybe unexpected truths. For now, all she could do was rest and prepare. Sleep was elusive. Her mind churned with possibilities and questions about the next day. The next day, at a quiet park, Amara sat at a table waiting for Simone. When Simone arrived, her expression carried an apology before she said a word. "Thank you for seeing me," Simone began, sitting down across from her. "You didn't have to." Amara nodded stiffly. "You said you have information." Simone took a breath, her eyes glistening. "First, I need you to know I regret betraying you. I took a bribe to leak your plan, and it haunts me. Afterward, the Housemans kept using me to silence minority founders, threatening to ruin me if I refused. Eventually, I went to the Department of Justice and began collecting evidence." She handed over a drive. "This has proof they discriminated and laundered money through shell companies. The DOJ is building a case and needs your testimony." Amara stared at the drive, anger and sorrow mingling. "Why come to me now?" she asked quietly. "Because I can't keep living with this," Simone whispered. "And because last night you did something I couldn't. You stood up publicly and risked everything. You inspired me. I want to make it right." She wiped away a tear. "I know you have no reason to trust me. I'll understand if you don't. But I hope you'll use this to bring them down." Amara weighed her next words carefully. Forgiveness wasn't an absolution. It was a choice about how much of your future you allowed to be shaped by your past. Simone had hurt her deeply, but she had also been victimized by the same power structure. "You were wrong," Amara said, her voice steady. "You hurt me. But the people we need to hold accountable are the ones who created this system. I will testify. And I hope you'll continue to speak up, not because it absolves you, but because it's the right thing to do." Simone nodded vigorously. "I will, and there's something else. The board leak about your decision came from Martin. He's been taking calls from Houseman's sons. They promised him a seat on their board if he forced you out. I discovered it when one of Houseman's assistants sent the wrong email. I've included it." The revelation tightened a knot in Amara's stomach. The betrayal was deep, but she felt a calmness settle over her. She had faced worse and prevailed. "Thank you for telling me," she said. We'll handle him. After Simone left, Amara sat alone with her thoughts. She remembered her parents' sacrifices and her own years of study. She had known prejudice and betrayal, but also solidarity and courage. Simone's confession was both an indictment and an opportunity. Back at Lewis Capital, Amara convened her leadership team. They huddled around the conference table as she recounted Simone's revelation. Maria's eyes narrowed as she scrolled through the documents. "This is explosive," she said. "It shows systematic discrimination and fraud. It's not just immoral, it's illegal." She glanced up. "If we're going to hand this over to the DOJ, we need to be careful. There will be retaliation." "We're not alone," Amara replied. "Melanie's piece is dropping tomorrow. Jameson is ready to support. And there are dozens of founders who will come forward once they know they're not alone. We cannot let fear stop us. We'll coordinate with the DOJ, and we'll inform our board." She called an emergency board meeting and attached the evidence. Martin, exposed as the source of the leak, protested, but Amara cut him off and reminded him that complicity was not an option. Leadership, she knew, meant drawing lines and accepting consequences. Melanie's exposé, published the next day, detailed years of discriminatory practices and quoted Amara's decision. The DOJ swiftly opened a formal investigation. Investors fled Houseman Capital and protesters took to the streets. Gregory offered a vague apology on television and sent Amara a handwritten note asking for forgiveness. She fed it to the shredder. Within weeks, charges were filed against the Housemans, and Martin resigned from the board. Simone and Amara testified. Minority founders regained patents and secured funding through Lewis Capital and Harlow's joint initiative. Industry leaders began debating responsibility alongside returns. During the trial that followed, Gregory looked smaller than he had at any gala. He sat before a judge and a crowd of people who had once feared his influence. His voice, so commanding when he tore up a woman's invitation, now faltered as he admitted that he had judged people by their skin and their accents. He spoke in halting sentences about never considering the human cost of his decisions, about the shame he felt watching his empire crumble because of his prejudice. His words did not undo the hurt he caused, but they cracked open the veneer of invincibility around him. Those he had ignored for years watched him confront his own behavior. The judge's gavel fell with a sense of accountability rather than triumph, and the proceedings signaled that no one, not even the wealthiest, was above the values the community fought to uphold. Amara's partnership with Jameson flourished. They launched a fund called the Freedom Initiative, dedicated to backing companies led by people from marginalized communities. They offered mentorship, resources, and access to networks that had once been barred. Marcus helped design the internship program, bringing in students who looked like him. At the launch event, Amara stood on stage, flanked by Jameson, Melanie, and a line of entrepreneurs whose dreams were finally being realized. She looked out at the audience and saw her younger self reflected in their eyes. "I want to tell you a story," she began, her voice carrying across the hall. "Not long ago, I stood in a ballroom where some people thought I didn't belong. They tried to define me. They failed. Not because I'm special, but because I remembered who I was and who I wanted to be. I remembered my parents' words. If they don't make space, build your own table. Tonight, I'm not just standing at a table I built. I'm inviting you to build with me. Let's make sure no one has to tear down a wall just to be seen." The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus beamed. Melanie wiped away a tear. Jameson squeezed her shoulder. Even Simone, standing at the back, smiled through her own tears. In that moment, the pain and betrayal of the past were still there, but they were outshone by the purpose forged from them. Later, in the quiet of her office, Amara watched the city lights flicker. The skyline was a series of stories, each window a life unfolding. She thought about the journey from her parents' kitchen table, to this glass tower. She thought about the young girl who had once been told she didn't fit in. She smiled. She had not only fit, she had rebuilt the space. The scars were still there, but they were part of the architecture, reminders of battles fought and lessons learned. She didn't need to prove she belonged. She had built the room. As the camera of our story pulls back, Amara's figure becomes a silhouette against the glittering city. There is no dramatic music, just the hum of life continuing, the sound of a company humming with purpose, the whisper of a community strengthened by solidarity. This isn't the end of the work or the struggle. Prejudice doesn't evaporate overnight, but it's a testament to the power of resilience, of allies speaking up, of leveraging privilege for justice. Amara's humane revenge was not in ruining the Housemans, but in uplifting those they tried to suppress. Gregory's regret may one day become wisdom if he chooses to listen and change. For now, Amara chooses hope. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you witnessed or experienced something similar? How would you have responded? Let's create a space where respect and empathy guide our discussions. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories of injustice met with courage, of communities building their own rooms, please like this video and subscribe. Your support helps amplify voices that need to be heard.